Welcome to the final episode of season 4. I can't believe we made it this far. As always, thank you so much for sticking around. We always like to wrap up the season with kind of a best of. So if you're not haven't listened to all the episodes, which we always encourage you to do because obviously every episode we do is awesome. Why wouldn't you want to listen to them? But sometimes there might be content that is slightly more applicable to your life, your situation at the moment. So we always just like to talk about our favorite moments in the season and use this as almost a cliff notes for you to figure out which ones, if you haven't listened to every episode, go back and listen to them. Or if you're like, I don't think I caught that in that particular episode. It's an encouragement to go back and listen again, pull out your journal, make some notes so that you catch all of the good nuggets that we're throwing at you with our episodes.
Yes, so this is so exciting. I love wrapping up an episode or a season like this when we get to talk about what our favorite moments are. It's probably one of my favorite things about the season because we just really get to go back and rehash and relive some of the best of. And I think I'm just going to go way back to the beginning when we were talking about the Is It Normal episode. It was first episode of the season. And I think that really came at a good time, but understanding and really remembering and reminding myself that it doesn't matter if it's normal or not because we get to make what we want out of our relationships. And I think that's something that I remember and then I forget as people start to have an influence and I have to go back and go, no, it's my life, it's my relationship. I get to pick what's right for me. And does this feel good versus is it what everybody else tells me to do?
We don't typically plan out the season with this is going to be the theme of the season, but kind of that idea of is this normal ran through a lot of our episodes this season, kind of inadvertently or maybe subconsciously. We ended up plotting it that way because we had that hint of a theme through, I think, several of our episodes this season. And for me as well, it's a great reminder to listen to what feels good for you and your relationship and to stop letting other people influence that, because we talked about that not only in the Is This Normal, but in one of my other favorite ones is the dating, relationships, and social media, because for better or worse, social media is not going anywhere. And so finding out what's normal for you in regards to what you're seeing on social media, what you're sharing on social media, and the effect that that can have on a relationship, whether you intend that to or not.
Yes, so sometimes you look through a lens, and I think on that episode, we very specifically talked about how if you go down that path and you don't keep your social media feed clean, how you can be filled with are these red flags and normal things taken out of context can appear to be red flags. And so we really talked about keeping your social media clean and how to keep it relevant to what it is that's going to have the best influence on your life, because I think you're right, we're right. It does, that was an underlying current of is this right for me? But on the social media side, we get can get so caught up in what other people are doing or saying, and if we're not managing our feed, then we can get caught up in that too, and it can influence our lives in a way that we weren't anticipating and aren't liking, even if it's a subconscious influence. So I think that was an important episode just to talk about that in general.
Yes. And I think it's definitely a topic that so many of our topics we revisit time and time again. And I know that the social media thing will obviously probably come up at a later date. But again, it's bringing that awareness of, are you judging your relationship with rules that aren't even for you? So it's about being very clear about your relationship with that. And it's a troubled road to walk, but hopefully giving people some perspective on how to better navigate that without losing your mind. Is that the way to say it?
Yes, without going crazy listening to what everybody else has to say. But then at the same time, I really like episodes where we bring other people in and get outside perspectives. I mean, Lisa, you and I both know that we have great perspectives on life and relationships and
Yeah.
all of that. But again, but it's always fun to bring an outside perspective in, especially on topics that we may or may not be familiar with. And so I love the fact that this season we were able to bring some guests in that talked very specifically about dating and relationships after going through the loss or the death of a partner. That was a fun episode to record too.
Yes, they were amazing guests who provided the insight. I think does translate very well, obviously, to people who have lost a partner, but I think it really applied to anyone who was trying to get themselves back out there after any kind of like big upheaval, and just really some amazing perspective on taking your time, knowing what's right for you. And what we have talked about in countless other episodes is getting really comfortable being you and being who you are and with yourself, and then letting a partner, a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever that is, complement and add value to your life, and not creating this life around, well, if I don't have a partner, who am I?
Yes. And I think we talked about that in one of the other episodes too, or at least that was a piece of the episode where we really talked about, are you planning your life around your partner, or are you planning your life and letting your partner fill in the gaps? And I think we really hit that again on that guest interview, but I think that was an important takeaway from the season, or one of my favorite takeaways from the season was talking about that.
Yes, that was obviously one of the things that stuck with me after that episode, was like, man, just seeing like the confidence that both of them radiated in like the life that they had built after this big momentous life event. And you're like, man, I haven't even done that. And I want, I want that. I want to be as cool and confident and together as those two women were. And we can't wait for you. Hope you go back and listen to that episode because it was amazing. But that definitely is something that is always, I think, going to stick with me. I'm like, am I creating this life that I want, and letting somebody else join it, and not putting everything on hold until this person does exactly what I need or want them to do.
Right. Remembering not to change the person you're with, but accepting them for who they are too, I think was another important key underpinning that kind of came throughout the season, is being yourself. But remember, as much as you're working on yourself, to remember to let the other person be who they are, and let them show you who they are, and make sure that you really like that person, rather than liking the fact that you're in a relationship and expecting that person to change. And that was it was an undercurrent. I don't know that we specifically talked about it, but that undercurrent of that came across in many episodes. And I think that was one of my favorite things about the season, was really emphasizing that point without being so blunt as to say it the way that I just did.
Well, I think it was like that undercurrent in when we talked about, am I settling? Am I just gonna getting this relationship because I cannot show up to another party / family function / work event without somebody on my arm? And this idea of, well, something is better than nothing, right? And I think it also kind of hinted into that if they wanted to, they would. Those are both kind of like partner topics where they're like, are you settling for somebody who's giving you a half-assed effort? And are you expecting things of a relationship that you aren't communicating? Because it's always, always, always going to come back to, how are you communicating? Are you telling this person this is what I expect? And they're telling you, I'm not going to do that. So sometimes it's about taking your blinders off and being like, okay, their words are saying one thing, but their actions are showing me something very different. And to always trust their actions, because that's a much more reliable indicator of what's truly going on than any kind of fancy words are going to be.
Yes, yes. And I think that was something really great that we had talked about. And that also just kind of hit home to remember to let people be who they are. And then from there, we kind of got into one of my favorite topics. I personally just love to travel, plan on doing a lot of that this year in general. So we talked about how to plan for your first trip together, what to expect or what you can do, and some tips to prepare for traveling together for the first time, which was really an exciting episode for me just because I like to travel so much and I have my way of doing it. And sometimes compromising is not as easy as it should be.
It was kind of one of those fun pivots where we're like, we don't always talk about serious stuff. We do have some because we also talked about, because I loved the travel one too, because my boyfriend and I are talking sort of about travel. It's this like tentative thing, but it's also the fact that you're going to be spending like 24 hours a day with this person that maybe you only see for a few hours once a week. So it was definitely for me an eye opener as well, to be like, okay, there are some other things besides just who picks the music and who's bringing snacks that you have to think about when you start undertaking this really great way to kind of bond yourself and do some traveling.
And then you mentioned that we don't always talk about serious stuff, and sometimes we talk about fun stuff. And who doesn't love flirting? And so, taking some time to talk about flirting and giving some, and talking about prompts and cues and different ways that you can flirt with your partner, whether you're in a new relationship or an established relationship. I think we both enjoyed that one. It took us 2 episodes to get through all of that content. So that's definitely a highlight.
We started out like, this is what we're going to talk about. I'm like, oh crud, we ran out of time. So it was probably our first very significant 2-parter. Like, we had to talk about this because we just had so much to talk about, because flirting, I feel like, is such an underrated thing sometimes, where you have very definite ideas, and it's easy to see when you're dating or when you're trying to get someone's attention. But I really love the fact that we also took time to talk about when you're in a relationship and when you've kind of gotten more established with somebody. You don't want the flirting to stop just because, you've had to hold somebody's hair back when they're being sick, or you've seen them at their very worst and their very best. It should always be this constant cycle of wanting to be flirtatious with your partner. And so, yes, that was a really kind of fun one to dive into and talk a little bit more about.
I like when we get into the fun ones, and previous seasons when we've done the sexy talk and now we've kind of done the flirting. Those are some of my favorite episodes just because they really hit the fun side of dating. And that to me is what keeps the relationship fresh and what keeps the relationship going. Yes, you have to know how to and be willing to have those serious conversations. But if there's no fun in your relationship, then why are you in a relationship? Right? Are you in a relationship to just be there? But our relationship should be fun and rewarding and adding something to our lives. And so I think those episodes are really my favorite and really get me talking a lot, or cause a lot of words to come out of my mouth and get on my soapbox, because I think that is a really important part of a relationship that very quickly goes by the wayside after the first few dates.
Exactly. And I think because I'm excited that it's finally, as of recording, we are seeing the light at the end of the winter tunnel. And we also talked about summer dating ideas, which, yes, were great for like first date ideas, second date. But again, using those ideas when you're in a more established relationship as well, and getting yourself out and trying something new, and knowing that it doesn't always have to be getting outside if you're not a hot weather person. I get it. But trying to date your spouse, date your long-term significant other, and get outside and outside of your comfort zone. We always encourage that, trying something new and something different. And now that the weather's warming up, what new fun things can you go out and get yourself in trouble with?
And with the end of the summer and we're starting on some of those dates, I really like the fact that we talked about how to snag a second date and how to set the conversation up to show your interest in an unobtrusive way, so that maybe you can go out and do more than one of those summer date ideas with your someone special. So I really like that too. That was a lot of fun. And actually, even in preparation for the episode, to go back and do some research and to really think on that and put some effort into some of these episodes, it's kind of fun too on the backside, and all the stuff that our listeners don't get to see that goes into this. but I really like doing some of that because that makes me better in my relationship, and it helps me bring forth better insight to anyone who might be listening to us here or any of you out there listening. So that was really a fun episode too, that had a lot of great insight into it.
Well, and I think like in anything, you start to get, I don't want to say complacent, but you just kind of get to this point of, oh, I don't remember how we got a second date. We just both wanted it, right? And sometimes it's not necessarily that. Sometimes somebody made some sort of an effort, but maybe you were just too much in the like little bubble of this is awesome, this is amazing, that you forget that it was a whole lot of like touching or it was a whole lot of not so subtle hints about, hey, we should do this again, kind of thing. So it's always amazing when we do some of these episodes because, like you, it gives me sometimes a different perspective on how I react in my relationship. But I think it also hopefully makes me a better partner because I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about this stuff now and trying to be more proactive instead of reactive to some things.
Yeah, keeping that up and from a proactive front, I think is important because we both parties have to put effort into a relationship, and sometimes it's really easy to get complacent. And I agree with you. I think a lot of what we talk about helps me to remember to be proactive in my own relationship so that I don't fall into all the traps that we talk about.
Because good gosh, there's sometimes a lot and they're well hidden, right? Like, oops, I stepped in that. Did not mean to do.
That really smells like dog shit. Oh, yes, yes. So I think we've did a really good recap of what happened this season, and we had some really great episodes. So please, if you haven't listened and anything that we have talked about struck a chord, go back and listen to some of our episodes and let us know what you want us to talk about in our next season. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a whole new list of topics and a whole new season full of ideas. And we would love to talk about things that are relevant to you, everything that has to do with love and relationships. So drop us a line at soyou'readytodate@gmail.com. And we will see you back at the start of season 5.